3:41 a.m., April 9, 2026. Quincy, Washington. A leased data hall at 1200 Quarry Road sat behind a corrugated steel facade and a sign that read, Cloud North Solutions, Tier 3 Hosting. No logo, no client directory in the lobby, just a keypad, a camera, and behind the interior door, row after row of server racks humming at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, under 14 industrial cooling units, pulling power from a dedicated substation on the eastern wall. At 3:41 a.m., that facade was still intact. By 3:49 a.m., it was not. 8 minutes. That is how long it took a 14-agent Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force team, operating under a sealed Title 18 warrant, signed 4 days earlier by a federal magistrate in the Eastern District of Washington, to enter, secure, and begin forensic imaging of 11 encrypted servers inside that building, without switching on a single interior light, without a single alarm reaching its monitoring station, and without anyone inside the building knowing federal agents were already in the room. By dawn on April 9, 2026, 22 individuals were in federal custody across 4 states. 4 data halls had been seized, 11 encrypted servers had been imaged in place, and $512 million in fraudulently obtained cryptocurrency, pooled from 84,000 individual victims across the United States, had been traced, mapped, and frozen inside a forensic blockchain reconstruction that would become, according to the Justice Department, one of the most technically complex financial crime prosecutions in Secret Service history. This is the story of Joint Task Force Citadel. It started 6 weeks earlier with a junior analyst at a Treasury FinCEN node who noticed that a number kept repeating, and that it had no business repeating at all. To understand what happened inside that data hall on April 9th, you need to understand how the scheme was built. Because what 9 separate cryptocurrency tokens, 9 separate marketing teams, 9 separate white papers, and 9 separate sets of promotional social media accounts had in common was a single architectural fact, one that was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, and invisible even then unless you were looking at all 9 at once. 1 deployer wallet, 1 hidden fingerprint, 38 seconds. 6 weeks before the raid, on the morning of February 23, 2026, Elena Vasquez, 38 years old, was at her workstation at the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network analytical node in Vienna, Virginia. Vasquez had been with FinCEN for 9 years. Before that, 4 years as a blockchain compliance auditor at a regional bank in Charlotte. She had a master's degree in financial mathematics from Georgia Tech, and a specific habit her colleagues described as almost pathological. She built comparison tables in silence, side by side, looking for things that matched when they should not. On February 23rd, Vasquez was running routine pattern surveillance on a batch of newly flagged DeFi token launches that had generated a volume spike on the FinCEN monitoring dashboard over the prior 8 days. The flag was automated, a threshold crossing in aggregate deposit velocity. Routine, the kind of flag that generated dozens of preliminary review tickets a month, most of which resolved to legitimate new token liquidity events, and were closed within 48 hours. Vasquez pulled 9 tickets. All 9 were flagged in the same rolling window. All 9 involved new cryptocurrency tokens promoted as mining pool investment vehicles, a structure where retail investors deposited funds purportedly to share in the revenue from pooled crypto mining operations. Different token names, different websites, different promotional voices on social media, different claimed mining locations, one supposedly in rural Montana, one in central Texas, one in rural Idaho. She opened the on-chain transaction records for all 9, side by side, and started building her comparison table. The detail that stopped her was not a sum, it was not a wallet address, it was a duration. Across all 9 tokens, at the moment of initial liquidity pool deployment, the transaction that officially launched each token on the blockchain, the gap between the deployment transaction being broadcast to the network and the first investor deposit being accepted was exactly 38 seconds. Not approximately 38 seconds. Not a range between 35 and 41. Exactly 38. Every single time. Across 9 supposedly independent launches over 11 weeks. Vasquez flagged the finding internally at 11:14 a.m. on February 23rd and called her direct supervisor, FinCEN Senior Analyst Coordinator Thomas Briggs, 51, 17 years at Treasury. Briggs reviewed the table in under 20 minutes. By noon, the ticket had been escalated to FinCEN's Special Investigations Unit. By 2:30 p.m., it had been formally referred to the Secret Service's Electronic Crimes Task Force and the IRS Criminal Investigation Cybercrime Unit. I spent time going through the case file on this, and one detail kept nagging me: the 38-second interval itself. A random developer does not accidentally produce the same initialization delay across 9 deployments. That number was a configuration parameter, baked into a reusable deployment script. And the person who wrote that script used it 9 times, apparently never once thinking it would become a fingerprint. Here is what the arithmetic looks like. 9 token launches, 11 weeks of operation, each launch promoted to retail investors as an independent mining pool opportunity. Combined deposit intake across all 9 tokens, $512 million. Average deposit per victim, approximately $6,100. Total victim count, 84,000 individuals across all 50 states, with California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois accounting for 61% of total deposits. Each of those 9 tokens ran on a smart contract. Each smart contract contained an identical embedded function, a drain mechanism triggered not by any human action, not by any detectable off-chain signal, but by a preset block height, a specific point in the blockchain's sequential record at which the contract would automatically transfer 100% of the liquidity pool to a designated withdrawal address. To every investor watching from outside, the token just stopped paying out. The website went dark, the Telegram channel went silent, and the money was gone. From the initial FinCEN referral on February 23, Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force Special Agent in Charge Marcus Del Rey, 44, 16 years with USIS, and formerly lead financial analyst at the Secret Service's Cyber Intelligence Section in Washington, took point on what would be designated Operation Citadel. Within 72 hours of the referral, Task Force Citadel had its first formal case file number, US ECECTF 2026-0041. The team Del Rey assembled drew from 4 agencies. Secret Service ECTF provided the lead cyber forensic capability and arrest authority. IRS Criminal Investigations Cybercrime Unit contributed financial tracing capacity and grand jury subpoena infrastructure. FBI Washington Field Office's Cryptocurrency Financial Crime Squad contributed blockchain forensic tools and Title III wire intercept authority. Treasury FinCEN retained Vasquez as technical consultant, an unusual arrangement Del Rey pushed for specifically because, as he put it in the initial planning memo, the analyst who found the pattern is the analyst who understands the pattern. The first investigative step was passive. No contact with any identified suspect. No approach to any data facility. 48 hours of open source and on-chain mapping. Running blockchain forensic tools against the 9 token contracts simultaneously. Pulling every wallet address that had ever interacted with any of the 9 liquidity pools and sorting them by transaction volume, frequency, and recurrence. What that mapping produced over the first 72 hours was a tree structure. At the leaves, 84,000 victim wallet addresses, each showing inbound deposits and 0 meaningful outbound returns. At the trunk, a single Ethereum wallet address, later designated Deployer Alpha in task force documentation, cryptographically verified as the originating address for all 9 token smart contracts. 1 wallet, 9 launches, $512 million. Deployer Alpha had never interacted directly with any retail investor. Every deposit had traveled inward through the token contracts. Every withdrawal had traveled outward through 3 mixer services, platforms designed to obscure the transaction trail by cycling funds through thousands of intermediate addresses before final consolidation. The laundering architecture ran across 4,100 pass-through wallets, distributed across 3 mixer services, before funds landed in 12 cold storage destination addresses. What surprises me most about this case is not the scale of the theft. It is the precision of the concealment. The operators had built a system specifically designed to defeat the most common blockchain forensic approaches, but they made a configuration error so small, so procedural, so buried in a deployment script, that it never registered as a risk. 38 seconds. By the end of the first week, Task Force Citadel had identified the 3 mixer services, all operating through servers with registered addresses in jurisdictions with no active mutual legal assistance treaty with the United States. Getting at the mixer records through conventional legal channels would take months. Del Rey's team needed a different approach. That obstacle nearly stalled the investigation at day 9. The on-chain path went cold at the mixer input addresses. Outbound transaction records on the other side of the mixers were fragmented, deliberately randomized, and distributed across hundreds of destination wallets in batches designed to blend with legitimate transaction traffic. The solution came from IRSCI's cybercrime unit, specifically from the unit's proprietary transaction graph analysis software. It applied a clustering algorithm not to individual wallet addresses, but to transaction timing patterns across the mixer outputs. The same 38-second interval Vasquez had identified in the deployment transactions appeared, in a subtler form, in the batching rhythm of the mixer outputs. A 61-second spacing between consolidation transactions, consistent across all 3 mixer services. The deployment script's author had used the same timing configuration at the output stage. The fingerprint extended all the way through the laundering chain. Now let's talk about who built this. The individual task force Citadel came to identify as the primary architect was known in the crypto investment community by the online handle Novamine. In public forums, Novamine was articulate, technically fluent, and presented as a passionate advocate for democratized access to crypto mining revenue. The Novamine persona had a Telegram following of roughly 41,000 accounts at its peak, a professional-looking website with a corporate address in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a portfolio of promotional content repackaged under different branding across all 9 token launches. The person behind Novamine, designated in task force documentation as Subject 1, was a 36-year-old male with a master's degree in computer science from a university in the Pacific Northwest. His prior career, traceable through court records and professional registration databases, was as a blockchain smart contract developer for legitimate DeFi projects between 2019 and 2022. No prior criminal record, no prior federal contact. He had worked briefly for 2 separate registered cryptocurrency exchanges, leaving both under circumstances described in employment records as mutual separation. Subject 1 operated through a corporate structure with a registered address in Scottsdale and a second registered address in the British Virgin Islands. The BVI entity held the controlling interest in a third LLC registered in Wyoming. The Wyoming LLC was the nominal operator of Cloud North Solutions, the cloud hosting front that leased the data hall at 1200 Quarry Road in Quincy, Washington, and 3 additional facilities, one in Reno, Nevada, one in Columbus, Ohio, and one in Ashburn, Virginia. All 4 facilities housed server infrastructure. All 4 were operational on the night of April 9th. Subject 1 was not operating alone. Task force documentation identified 21 additional individuals with defined operational roles. 6 smart contract developers responsible for customizing the 9 token contracts from the reusable base script. 4 social media and promotional managers who maintained the Novamine network's public-facing accounts. A technical operations team of 7 responsible for the physical infrastructure at the 4 data halls. And 4 individuals responsible for the fiat currency off-ramp, converting cryptocurrency from the 12 cold storage destination addresses into wire transfers routed through shell accounts in 3 jurisdictions. Publicly, he paid in cash. He tipped well. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, something of a homebody. He drove a gray sedan with a cracked rear bumper for 3 years without fixing it. He told people he worked in cloud infrastructure. Underneath that, the financial architect of a $512 million fraud that over 11 weeks had quietly drained the retirement savings, emergency funds, and investment accounts of 84,000 Americans who believed they were earning passive income from a mining operation that had never processed a single block. Here is what this tells us about the current state of crypto fraud prosecution. The scheme worked not because it was technically unprecedented, mining pool rug pulls have been documented since 2020, but because it was operationally disciplined. Subject 1 separated every layer: the public persona, the smart contract development, the infrastructure management, the laundering architecture. No single layer had direct contact with another. The only connection point was deployer alpha, and deployer alpha was never supposed to be traced back to a physical location. The trace to physical infrastructure came from the electricity. Server racks at the scale Subject 1 was running, 4 data halls, 11 active servers performing continuous smart contract operations and blockchain node maintenance, drew a distinctive power consumption signature. Task Force Citadel, working with a sealed administrative subpoena to utility companies in all 4 target jurisdictions, identified 4 commercial electricity accounts with consumption patterns consistent with professional-grade server infrastructure, all opened within the same 30-day window in 2024, all billed to LLCs that traced back through the Wyoming BVI structure. The utility accounts were the thread, the data halls were the needle. By the end of Week 3, Task Force Citadel had physical addresses for all 4 facilities, subpoenaed lease records, and confirmation from passive drive-by surveillance, Secret Service agents in unmarked vehicles, standard business hours traffic patterns, no approach. That human activity at all 4 sites matched an operational server farm profile, periodic hardware deliveries, overnight maintenance visits by a small technical team, power infrastructure upgrades. The sealed grand jury subpoenas for Cloud North Solutions corporate records came back on March 28. What they contained reshaped the case. The corporate records included internal communications, email and encrypted messaging, preserved on a company-registered domain server. Inside those communications were what task force documentation called the Playbook, explicit instructions, written by Subject 1 to his development team, on how to configure the drain function in each token's smart contract, at which block heights to set the trigger, and how to distribute the promotional push to maximize deposit volume in the 4-day window before the drain executed. There was also a line in those communications that stayed with the investigators who read it. Subject 1 had written, in a message to his promotional team the week before the 9th token launch, "Nobody checks the deployment timestamp. Nobody ever checks the deployment timestamp." He was wrong by exactly 1 analyst. Title III wire intercepts authorized under a sealed order from the Eastern District of Washington came online on March 31st. Within 4 days, Task Force Citadel had confirmed voice communications between Subject 1 and 3 of his co-defendants, including the 4 individuals managing the fiat off-ramp. The intercepts confirmed that Subject 1 knew, by early April, that the 9th token's drain had completed, and that the full $512 million had cleared the mixer architecture. According to intercepted communications, he was already planning a 10th scheme. Here's the take that'll probably get some pushback. The 3 mixer services that enabled this laundering, operating in jurisdictions with no legal assistance treaties, are not a peripheral element of the story. They are the central infrastructure problem. Without them, the $512 million trail leads directly from victim to perpetrator in readable form. Those platforms are legal in their home jurisdictions. Subject 1 did not create that gap. He just used it. And until that gap is closed through treaty or unilateral action, the next version of this scheme will use it too. The pre-raid planning phase for Operation Citadel ran from April 3rd through April 8th. The core tactical problem was simultaneity. 4 facilities across 4 states, Washington, Nevada, Ohio, and Virginia. 11 servers across those 4 facilities, each requiring immediate forensic imaging before any encryption or remote wipe command could execute. The interval between the first federal agent appearing on any camera feed associated with any facility and the moment of secure physical control over all servers had to be as close to 0 as possible. Subject 1 had not been identified as having a manual dead switch, but his development team's internal communications included references to contingency protocols that task force forensic analysts could not fully decode. The 4 facility teams were designated Alpha through Delta. Alpha Team, 14 agents, Secret Service ECTF lead, drew the Quincy, Washington facility at 1200 Quarry Road, the largest of the 4, holding 6 of the 11 target servers. Bravo Team, 9 agents, FBI WFO lead, drew the Reno facility. Charlie Team, 8 agents, Secret Service ECTF with IRS CI support, drew Columbus. Delta Team, 7 agents, Secret Service ECTF lead, drew Ashburn. All 4 teams were on a synchronized countdown. 0 hour, 3:41 a.m. Pacific Time. Every team inserted simultaneously, accounting for time zones, so that no facility breach could telegraph the operation to any other location. The fiber optic cable serving 1200 Quarry Road was cut at 3:47 a.m. by a 2-person technical element that had been in position since 3:15 a.m. Cellular jamming, covering the 700 MHz through 2.5 GHz bands, came online at 3:52 a.m. from a jammer unit in a panel van registered to a fictional electrical contracting company parked on Quarry Road's service access lane since 2:55 a.m. At 3:41 a.m., Alpha Team moved. The entry team used a hydraulic door ram, a Striker 2 model, rated for steel core commercial doors, on the primary access point on the facility's north face. The door gave in one application. Time to breach, 4 seconds. 6 agents on point, plate carriers, no firearms drawn. This was a server facility with no confirmed armed occupants. 2 agents split left to the cooling system control panel to prevent any automated shutdown triggered by the breach alarm. 4 agents moved directly to the server room. Secret Service, federal warrant. Nobody moves. The facility's night shift technician, a single individual, the overnight maintenance employee whose presence had been confirmed by passive surveillance, was seated at a monitoring terminal at the south end of the server room. He did not move. He placed both hands flat on the desk, visible. He was zip-cuffed and seated on the floor within 90 seconds of entry. The 6 remaining Alpha Team agents entered the server room at 3:47 a.m. and immediately began physical port blocking, plugging hardware write blockers into every external connection point on all 6 target servers before any other action. The write blockers were Tableau TX1 forensic units, pre-configured for the server models identified through Cloud North Solutions purchase records obtained via subpoena, from breach to write blocker deployment across all 6 servers, 6 minutes, 40 seconds. At forensic imaging, a bit-by-bit duplication of each server's storage array onto external forensic drives, began at 3:52 a.m. and ran for 4 hours and 17 minutes. The imaging was conducted while the servers remained powered and in place, using forensic software that created verified hash-authenticated copies without altering the original data state. In Reno, Bravo Team ran into a complication that came within 20 minutes of compromising the operation's timeline. The Reno facility's secondary access door, which appeared on the lease plans as a standard fire exit steel door, had been replaced at some point after those plans were filed, with an industrial-grade security door carrying a secondary electronic lock that appeared in no documentation. The Striker 2 RAM was not enough. The team's breach specialist, working with a hydraulic spreader bar, needed 11 minutes to defeat the secondary lock, 11 minutes during which the Reno servers were uncontrolled. The complication was resolved. No remote wipe executed. Bravo Team's forensic coordinator later confirmed that the server's activity logs showed no outbound connection attempts during the 11-minute window. The cellular jamming had held, and the fiber cut had closed off any network escape route. But it was 11 minutes during which the operation's margin was thinner than anyone in the planning phase had anticipated. What would you have done at 3:41 in the morning, with 11 servers across 4 states and one unexpected door standing between you and the evidence? Across all 4 facilities by 5:03 a.m. Pacific Time, every target server was under physical federal control, and imaging had begun. The synchronized operation had run 82 minutes from first breach to full site control across all 4 locations. Subject 1 was not at any of the 4 data halls. Intercept analysis had placed him, during the operational period, at a rented residence in Bend, Oregon. Not a listed facility, not in any corporate record, located only through the intercepts and a subsequent passive surveillance operation authorized under a separate sealed warrant. A 5th team, 6 agents, Secret Service XTF, executed a concurrent warrant at the Bend residence at 6:44 a.m. Pacific Time, after the 4 data halls were secured. Subject 1 was in bed. He did not resist. He did not speak. He was handcuffed, dressed, and walked to a waiting federal vehicle in under 4 minutes. You are under arrest pursuant to a federal warrant issued in the Eastern District of Washington. You have the right to remain silent. He said nothing. Across the 4 facilities and the Bend residence, the April 9th operation resulted in the physical arrest of 7 individuals, including Subject 1. The remaining 15 co-defendants were arrested over the subsequent 72 hours through coordinated warrant executions in California, Texas, Nevada, Florida, New York, and Georgia. By April 12, 2026, all 22 named defendants were in federal custody. From the 4 data halls, federal agents seized 11 servers, 44 external hard drives, documentation covering the corporate structure in 11 jurisdictions, and a physical evidence inventory that ran to 847 separate line items by the time the warehouse evidence log was closed 6 weeks after the raid. The cold storage wallets holding the laundered funds, 12 destination addresses confirmed through blockchain forensic analysis, were subjected to a federal civil asset forfeiture action filed alongside the criminal indictment. The total value frozen across those 12 addresses, plus additional funds recovered from intermediary wallets, still in transit at the time of the seizure, $396 million. The remaining $116 million had been converted to fiat currency through the off-ramp operation and was the subject of ongoing international tracing efforts through Interpol financial intelligence channels. At the press conference held at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Washington on April 14, 2026, Assistant United States Attorney Carla Mendenhall presented the outlines of the government's case to a room of reporters, cameras, and, in a decision made by the USAO specifically, representatives from victim advocacy organizations that had been quietly tracking mining pool fraud complaints for the prior 18 months. One of the agents on the forensic team, during the post-raid inventory at the Quincy facility, had set aside a separate folder from the seized documentation, printed emails from investors asking Cloud North Solutions' customer service address why their dashboard showed zero balance. The emails ran to 214 printed pages. Nobody had answered them. The grand jury indictment, unsealed on April 14, 2026, ran 218 pages and named all 22 defendants. The primary charges against Subject 1 and the 7 co-defendants identified as principals: wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. 1343, money laundering under 18 U.S.C. 1956, and securities fraud under 15 U.S.C. 78J, in conjunction with SEC Rule 10b-5, on the grounds that the 9 tokens were unregistered securities marketed using materially false statements about the existence and profitability of mining operations. The defense team, led by a firm with offices in Seattle and Los Angeles, entered appearances for Subject 1 within 48 hours of arrest and filed a motion to suppress the Title III intercept evidence within the first week, arguing that the affidavits supporting the intercept warrant had failed to establish probable cause independent of the FinCEN referral. The motion was denied on April 29 by U.S. District Judge Patricia Hollenbeck of the Eastern District of Washington. Defense counsel's trial strategy, as outlined in pretrial filings, rested on 3 arguments. First, the tokens were legitimate investment vehicles that failed due to market conditions, not fraud. Second, Subject 1, as a developer and infrastructure operator, had no direct knowledge of how the tokens were marketed to retail investors. Third, the drain mechanism was a disclosed feature of the token contracts, available for any investor to read in the published smart contract code on the blockchain. The prosecution's answer to all 3 was the internal communications, the playbook, the explicit instructions on drain trigger configuration, the line about deployment timestamps. On the disclosure question, the prosecution presented testimony from a government-retained blockchain expert who demonstrated to the jury that the drain function was embedded in the contract code in a way specifically designed to be non-obvious to a retail investor without advanced technical knowledge, and that none of the 9 tokens' promotional materials had disclosed its existence. The jury deliberated for 4 days, guilty on all counts. On July 22, 2026, Judge Hollenbeck sentenced Subject 1 to 23 years in federal prison, with no parole eligibility under federal sentencing guidelines, consecutive to any state charges. She ordered forfeiture of all personal assets traceable to the scheme, approximately $4.7 million in real property, vehicles, and personal accounts, in addition to the civil forfeiture of the cryptocurrency wallets. Mandatory restitution, $512 million, joint and several with all 22 co-defendants. Sentences for the remaining 21 co-defendants ranged from 3 years, 8 months, for the lowest-level promotional employees who cooperated with the government, to 17 years for the 4 individuals who managed the fiat off-ramp, whom the prosecution treated as knowingly integral to the laundering architecture. The 11 seized servers from Operation Citadel, once forensically processed, contained more than just the evidence needed for the 22 named defendants. The cold storage wallet management software on one of the Quincy servers included a contacts directory, encrypted but decrypted by IRSCI's cybercrime unit within 3 weeks of the raid. That directory contained the communication identities of 9 individuals in 5 foreign jurisdictions who had received test transfers from the laundering architecture, individuals whose names appeared in no public corporate registry and who had never been in contact with any FinCEN-flagged account. Those 9 names were transmitted to Interpol's Financial Crimes Division on May 3, 2026. As of the filing date of the indictment, 6 of the 9 had been identified to the satisfaction of the referring agencies. 3 remained partially identified. Today, those names are inside Interpol case files. They are not yet in handcuffs. The $396 million in frozen cryptocurrency is currently held in a federal digital asset forfeiture account, pending the outcome of the restitution proceedings. The U.S. Marshals Service Asset Forfeiture Division, working with FinCEN's Victim Identification Database and a claims process administered through the Eastern District of Washington, is managing distribution. The first victim restitution payment tranche was authorized on August 1, 2026. The $116 million that moved through the off-ramp before the seizure is still being traced. International financial intelligence channels have located approximately $44 million of it in 3 jurisdictions with pending mutual legal assistance requests. $72 million remains unaccounted for. Do you think the existing legal framework, the patchwork of treaty relationships, the mixer service loophole, the jurisdictional gaps, is adequate to stop the next version of this scheme? Drop your answer in the comments. We read all of them. Unpopular opinion: the 38-second timestamp was not the only near miss in this investigation. The drain mechanism was technically disclosed. It was on the blockchain, readable by anyone. The honest answer is that 84,000 people lost $512 million to a contract function that was technically public information. The gap between technically public and practically readable is where this scheme lived. And closing that gap is not a law enforcement problem. It is a consumer protection and regulatory design problem that no task force raid can solve. One repeating 38-second interval across 9 token launches unraveled a $512 million fraud network. Somewhere on the blockchain right now, another deployment timestamp is waiting for someone to build the comparison table. If you want to keep walking through federal case files the way the agents themselves walked through them, subscribe to FBI Documents and tell us in the comments which unsolved case you want us to open next. Case closed.